For decades, no one knew why Elvis was never charged by federal authorities, even when a serious case was ready. Now, a Vegas judge finally speaks, revealing secrets, hidden deals, and mysteries behind the king's life. Could fame really protect him from the law? Join us as we uncover the truth and step inside the secret world that protected Elvis. The charges that vanished overnight. The federal case against Elvis was real, detailed, and already moving. Investigators had spent months collecting records, statements, and timelines. Nothing about it was rushed. Each step followed normal procedure. Papers were typed, reviewed, and passed upward. Meetings were held behind closed doors. The language in the files was serious and direct. This was not a warning or a rumor. It was the kind of case that usually ends in court. The judge later said there was no doubt the system was preparing to act. Everything was in place. The process had already begun. The charges were not small or easy to dismiss. They carried weight under federal law, the kind that brings long hearings and heavy consequences. According to the judge, the evidence was considered strong enough to move forward. Agents believed they were close to the final stage. One more approval was needed. That approval was expected, not questioned. No one involved thought the case would stop. In similar situations, the next step would have been clear and fast. Elvis would have been formally charged. The system was doing what it always did, until it suddenly didn't. One night, without warning, the movement stopped. Files that were active were marked inactive. Meetings were canceled without explanation. Calls went unanswered. Agents were told to pause and wait. Some were reassigned. Others were simply told to drop the matter. No written reason was given. No official order was placed in the record. The judge later described it as a clean freeze. Not confusion, not delay, a stop. The kind that only happens when someone very powerful steps in quietly. What made the situation stranger was where the pause came from. It did not come from a courtroom decision. It did not come from a failed review. It did not come from Washington. The judge explained that the normal chain of command was bypassed. Instructions came from the side, not the top. People followed them anyway. That alone was alarming. Federal cases do not disappear without a trace. They are closed, lost, or overturned. This one was none of those. It was simply locked away. The judge admitted that at the time, even he did not have full answers. He only knew that the case was being protected from daylight. He sensed fear, not doubt. The kind of fear that comes from what might happen if things go too far. Charging Elvis would not stay limited to one courtroom. It would pull other names, other deals, and other secrets into view. The system saw risk, not justice. And when risk becomes too great, the system learns how to hide. Years later, the judge finally explained what he believed happened that night. Elvis was not cleared. He was shielded. The case was not weak. It was dangerous. Dangerous to people who did not want to be seen or questioned. The judge said the decision was made quickly and quietly, as if time itself was an enemy. Once the files were sealed, they stayed sealed. No appeal reopened them, no review challenged them. The silence became permanent. But the real question was not why the charges vanished. It was what Elvis knew that made them vanish at all. What Elvis knew that terrified powerful people. Elvis lived inside rooms most people never entered. These were not stages or studios. They were private spaces where deals were spoken softly and favors were traded carefully. He met politicians who wanted photos, but also wanted silence. He spoke with law officers who treated him as more than a citizen. He listened more than people realized. Over time, names, habits, and patterns began to connect. Elvis was not trained to gather secrets, but secrets came to him anyway. When powerful people relax, they talk. And Elvis was someone they trusted to stay quiet. According to the judge, this access slowly changed how Elvis was seen. He was no longer just famous. He became risky. He knew about private meetings that never appeared on calendars. He heard complaints about other officials. He learned how favors were returned without paper trails. None of this was written down, but it stayed in his memory. The danger was not that Elvis planned to expose anything. The danger was that once he was charged, he would be questioned. And questions have a way of opening doors no one can close. A federal trial does not stay focused on one person. Lawyers pull threads. They ask who was present, who approved actions, and who benefited. The judge said this was the fear. Elvis on the stand would not be a simple case. His testimony could lead far beyond the original charges. Even honest answers could cause damage. A single name spoken aloud could force another investigation. The system understood this. It was not about protecting Elvis as a person. It was about protecting what might spill out if he spoke freely. There was also concern about Elvis's state of mind. The judge hinted that pressure was building around him. Elvis felt watched. He felt managed. He knew people expected silence from him, even without saying it. That kind of pressure makes people unpredictable. If Elvis felt cornered by charges, he might stop cooperating. He might tell his story in ways no one could control. For those holding power, that possibility was unacceptable. Silence was safer than truth. Control was safer than court. This is where the idea of protection took a darker shape. Keeping Elvis free was not an act of kindness. It was a strategy. As long as he stayed outside the courtroom, rules could be bent quietly. Doctors could be chosen. Schedules could be adjusted. Access could be limited. But once the law stepped in publicly, all control would be lost. The judge said this clearly. The system feared losing control more than it feared breaking its own rules. So the choice was made. Not to clear Elvis, not to accuse him, but to hold him in a space between freedom and silence. The judge believes this decision shaped everything that followed. Elvis's life continued, but under invisible limits. He could move, but not freely. He could speak, but not fully. The case disappeared, but the pressure did not. And the next step was deciding how to keep Elvis quiet without ever locking him up. The quiet protection deal. After the charges were stopped, nothing returned to normal. Elvis was free, but something around him changed. The judge explained that this was the moment a quiet deal began to form. It was not written like a contract. No signatures were taken. No courtroom approved it. Yet everyone involved understood the terms. Elvis would not face federal charges. In return, his life would remain guided, watched, and shaped. This kind of deal did not need words. It worked through pressure, access, and control. Saying no was never truly an option. Elvis was never told the full truth. He was not shown the files or the evidence. Instead, he was given warnings, gentle ones at first. He was told certain paths were unsafe. Certain people were not to be questioned. Certain topics were better left alone. When he pushed back, the doors quietly closed. Invitations stopped coming. Support thinned. Then new people appeared, offering help, protection, and care. These people were approved. They were trusted by others, not by Elvis. This is how control often looks like concern. The judge described this period as a slow tightening. Elvis was still performing, still traveling, still living publicly. But privately, his choices became smaller. His schedule was managed. His environment was controlled. People close to him were filtered. Some were removed without explanation. Others were added suddenly. Elvis noticed, but he was tired. Now, the pressure of fame mixed with unseen fear wore him down. The protection that saved him from court began to cost him peace. Medical decisions became part of the deal. Elvis was encouraged to rely on approved doctors. These doctors were meant to keep him stable, quiet, and functional. The judge questioned whether healing was the true goal. Prescriptions increased, treatments overlapped, rest was delayed. When Elvis showed concern, he was reassured. When he hesitated, he was reminded how fragile his situation was. The message was clear, even when unspoken. Cooperation kept him safe. The judge said this kind of protection creates dependency. Once a person relies on others for safety, breaking away feels dangerous. Elvis began to trust the system protecting him, even as it drained him. He believed staying calm would keep trouble away. He believed silence was the price of peace, but silence has weight. Carrying secrets that are not yours slowly bends the mind. The judge believes Elvis was carrying more than fear. He was carrying responsibility for things he never agreed to hold. By the time Elvis realized the deal was a cage, it was too late. Speaking out would reopen sealed files. Refusing care would raise questions. Leaving his controlled circle would trigger alarms. The judge described it as a soft trap. No bars, no locks, just consequences waiting at every exit. Elvis stayed inside because the outside felt worse. Freedom without protection looked like destruction. And the longer Elvis stayed inside that quiet deal, the more his body began to fail in strange and troubling ways. The strange medical decisions. As the quiet deal continued, Elvis's health began to change in ways that confused even those closest to him. He was often tired, unfocused, and in pain. Some days he struggled to stand for long periods. Other days he seemed distant, as if his thoughts were heavy and slow. These changes did not come suddenly. They arrived step by step, almost gently. The judge later said this was important. A slow decline raises fewer questions. Sudden illness invites attention. Elvis's condition followed a path that stayed just quiet enough. Medical care became tightly managed. Doctors were selected for him, not by him. Some stayed only briefly. Others replaced them without clear reasons. Treatments overlapped. New medications were added before old ones were removed. Elvis trusted doctors by nature. He believed they wanted to help him perform, sleep, and cope. But the judge questioned why rest was never the main answer. Instead of slowing down, Elvis was pushed to continue. His body was treated like a machine that needed adjustment, not recovery. Prescriptions became central to Elvis's daily life. Pills helped him sleep. Pills helped him wake up. Pills helped him calm down. Pills helped him keep going. Each one had a purpose, but together they created confusion. The judge said this was where things became dangerous. Too many medications can hide real problems. They can also create new ones. Elvis complained of discomfort, but the response was often another prescription. The cycle continued. Relief was promised, but balance was never restored. What troubled the judge most was how warnings were handled. There were signs that Elvis's body was under stress. Weight changes, breathing issues, and heart strain were noted. Instead of reducing pressure, adjustments were made to keep him functional. The goal seemed to be stability, not health. The judge said it felt like Elvis was being maintained, not healed. This raised a hard question. Who decided what level of health was enough? And enough for what purpose? The judge hinted that medical control also meant silence. A tired man speaks less. A medicated man asks fewer questions. Elvis became more dependent on those around him. Decisions were made for him because he was not feeling well. This made it easier to guide his choices. When he doubted something, he was reminded of his fragile state. When he resisted, concern replaced explanation. Fear was never spoken aloud, but it was always present. By this stage, Elvis's life was carefully balanced on routine. Change was discouraged. Stress was avoided, but only certain kinds. Physical strain was ignored. Emotional strain was softened with medication. The judge believed this balance was intentional. As long as Elvis remained predictable, the quiet deal held. As long as he stayed alive and controlled, nothing else had to be addressed. But the human body cannot live forever under pressure without breaking. The judge stopped short of making direct accusations. Instead, he asked questions that still have no answers. Were the medical choices made for Elvis or for others? Was his decline simply poor health or the result of long-term management? Why were clearer warnings not followed? These questions stayed buried for years. They were never tested in court. They were never examined fully, and as Elvis grew weaker, the system stayed silent. Then came the final days when the careful balance collapsed, and the truth became impossible to ignore. The day Elvis passed away, and the questions that followed. The day Elvis passed away did not unfold like a clear story. It unfolded like a broken one. Time moved forward, but the details did not line up. According to the judge, the first reports were brief and careful. They focused on the result, not the process. Elvis was found unresponsive. Help was called, efforts were made. Then it was over. What happened before those final moments was left unclear. Small gaps appeared in the timeline. Minutes were missing, actions were assumed, not confirmed. From the very beginning, the story felt unfinished. People present that day gave accounts that sounded similar but not exact. The order of events shifted slightly from one telling to another. Who arrived first? Who noticed what? How long Elvis had been alone? These details matter in any serious review. Yet they were not pressed hard. The judge later said this was unusual. In most cases, differences are examined closely. Here, they were smoothed over. The focus stayed on closure, not clarity. The system moved quickly, as if slowing down would create problems. Medical explanations followed soon after. They pointed to natural causes linked to long-term health issues. On the surface, this made sense. Elvis had been unwell for some time, but the judge noted something troubling. The explanation came before all questions were asked. Some tests were not expanded, some findings were summarized, not explored. Language was chosen carefully. Nothing was false, but nothing was deeply explained either. It was enough to end the inquiry, not enough to understand the full picture. What stood out most was how fast the matter was settled. No extended federal review followed. No deep legal interest appeared. The judge explained that deaths connected to long-standing investigations usually reopen files. In this case, they stayed closed. The same silence that stopped the charges now surrounded the death. It was as if the system had already decided that looking backward was too dangerous. The past was sealed. The present was accepted. The future moved on. The judge believes this was not about disrespect. It was about protection. Reopening questions about Elvis's death could expose the quiet deal. It could force a review of medical decisions. It could reveal how closely his life had been managed. Most importantly, it could bring sealed federal files back into view. The system did not want that. Elvis's death became a final answer to many unanswered questions. Silence became permanent. There were also changes in records over time. Language softened. Details became less specific. The judge did not claim this was done with bad intent. He suggested it was done to keep things calm and controlled. Clear language invites clear questions. Soft language allows acceptance. Over the years, the story became simpler, even as the truth remained complex. Complexity was slowly removed. What remained was a version that asked for no follow-up. One question never left the judge's mind. If Elvis had lived, would the truth ever have surfaced? Death ended all risk of testimony. No court could question him. No lawyer could press him. No one could ask what he knew or why his life had been shaped the way it was. His death closed every door at once. The judge said this was the most troubling part. Not how Elvis passed away, but how his death solved too many problems. Whether Elvis's death was preventable remains unanswered, but the lack of urgency surrounding it speaks loudly. Silence can be an action. Waiting can be a choice. And what came next was even more unsettling, because the federal system chose not to ask a single serious question after he was gone. Why no federal investigation followed his death? After Elvis passed away, silence settled in quickly, not the kind that comes from confusion, but the kind that feels decided. The judge explained that in cases tied to sealed investigations, death usually triggers review. Files are reopened. Old decisions are questioned, responsibility is checked. This did not happen here. Federal offices did not move. Requests were not made. Oversight did not expand. The system behaved as if nothing new had occurred, even though everything had changed. The judge said this absence of action was the loudest signal of all. Elvis had once been close to federal charges. His life had been shaped by quiet pressure. His health had declined under controlled care. And yet, when his life ended, the system did not look back. No one asked whether past choices played a role. No one tested whether the quiet deal had consequences. It was as if the system had already prepared for this ending. One reason, the judge suggested, was fear of exposure. A federal investigation does not stay focused on one event. It moves outward. It asks why earlier decisions were made. It looks at who intervened and when. In Elvis's case, this would have led back to the vanished charges. It would have raised questions about why a strong case was stopped. It could have revealed who had the power to stop it. For some people, that risk was greater than any duty to review the death. Another reason was continuity. Many of the same people involved years earlier were still in position. They remembered the pressure. They remembered the warnings. They understood what had been protected and why. Opening an investigation would mean questioning their own choices. It would mean admitting that silence had been intentional. The judge said systems rarely do this to themselves. They protect their structure first. Truth comes second, if at all. The judge also spoke about timing. Elvis passed away at a moment when attention was shifting elsewhere. The world was changing. Priorities were moving. In that environment, silence was easier to maintain. There was no demand from inside the system to act. Without internal pressure, nothing moved. Files stayed sealed. Decisions stayed buried. What was not questioned slowly became accepted. What disturbed the judge most was how natural this silence felt to those involved. There was no panic, no rush to explain, no urgency to review medical choices or personal management. The system behaved as if the outcome had been expected, not planned, but anticipated. Elvis's decline had been visible for a long time. His death was not a shock to those watching closely. In that sense, doing nothing became the easiest path. The judge made a careful distinction here. He did not claim that Elvis was meant to die. He claimed that once the system decided not to intervene deeply, the result became less important than the stability that followed. Death ended uncertainty. It ended the risk. It ended the chance of testimony. It ended the need to keep managing a fragile situation. From the system's view, it closed the final loose end. There was also the issue of jurisdiction. Without an active federal case, responsibility became blurred. Local explanations were accepted. Medical summaries were taken as sufficient. No agency felt fully responsible to push further. This allowed silence to spread without resistance. Each office assumed another had decided. In truth, no one decided anything. They simply agreed not to look. The judge admitted that this silence weighed on him for years. He understood why it happened. He even understood the fear behind it. But understanding did not remove responsibility. The law exists to ask hard questions, especially when power is involved. In this case, the law stepped back. Elvis's death became a closing chapter instead of a turning point. The truth stayed buried, not because it was proven false, but because it was never tested. And after decades of carrying that silence, the judge finally chose to speak, knowing it would reopen everything the system worked so hard to close. The judge's final revelation. After decades of silence, the judge finally spoke, not in court, not in a public report. He spoke quietly, knowing that words could travel farther than files or sealed decisions. He wanted the story told, but carefully. The judge explained that what had happened with Elvis was never simple. It was never about innocence or guilt. It was about control, fear, and decisions made in shadows. Elvis had been protected, yes, but the protection carried consequences few understood. The judge revealed that Elvis was never fully free. Even in life, even on stage, he moved inside invisible walls. His friends, his doctors, his schedules, even his health were influenced by people who wanted to manage risk, not just ensure safety. The judge said this was unusual, but not unprecedented. When someone has knowledge or access that could shake powerful systems, protection often comes with rules the public cannot see. Elvis had knowledge. He had access. And because of that, the people in control made sure he stayed safe, but not fully alive in the way others are. He explained that the quiet deal began the night the federal charges disappeared. Elvis would never face court. The case would remain sealed, but in return, his life would be monitored, guided, and in some ways, shaped to keep him compliant. The judge said this was not cruel, at least not intentionally. It was calculated. Silence and cooperation were safer than questions and conflict, and for decades, that arrangement worked. Elvis lived, performed, and traveled, but he lived under limits he did not fully understand. Medical decisions were the clearest evidence of that arrangement. Doctors were chosen and rotated, prescriptions were increased, treatments overlapped. The judge said the goal seemed to be stability, not health. The system did not want Elvis dead, but it did not want him fully independent either. His body became a tool for control. Every pill, every schedule, every intervention kept him functioning just enough to maintain the agreement. The judge called it a soft cage. No bars, no chains. Just a life carefully guided so that nothing would spill out of control. The judge admitted that he often wondered what would have happened if Elvis had resisted, if he had asked too many questions, if he had refused treatments, if he had gone against the plan. The system depended on his cooperation, whether willing or unaware. But resistance would have brought chaos. Sealed files would reopen. Investigations would reignite. Secrets would be exposed. That is why the judge described the quiet deal as a delicate balance. Too little guidance, and everything collapses. Too much, and a life bends under weight. Elvis's death revealed the final truth of the deal. The judge said the system did not investigate deeply because doing so would expose itself. All the quiet protections, the stop charges, the managed medical care, they would have to be explained. The federal agencies stayed silent. The death ended all risk of testimony. No questions were asked. No files reopened. From the system's perspective, the ending solved every problem. Elvis was gone. But so were the risks. The judge's revelation was also personal. He admitted he had carried the burden of knowing too much for decades. He had seen how the system worked quietly. He had seen what happens when fame meets power and fear. He had seen a man's life guided from the shadows. And he had stayed silent while the world assumed Elvis had simply passed away from natural causes. Speaking now was his way of unburdening truth, even if it came too late to change the past. Finally, the judge emphasized one hard lesson. Protection is not always kindness. Safety is not always freedom. Silence can save lives, but it can also control them. Elvis had been protected from law, but he had been confined by it in invisible ways. What do you think about this confession from the judge? Do you think it changes anything?